You feel the cold morning mist clinging to your weathered face as you stand among Caesar's legions at the banks of the Rubicon River. The year is 49 BC, and the world you have known for decades is about to shatter like pottery dropped on stone. Your bronze armor feels heavier than usual, the leather straps cutting into your shoulders as you shift your weight from one foot to the other. The river before you gurgles softly, its dark waters reflecting the pale winter sky. The smell of wet earth and dying grass fills your nostrils as you watch your commander pace before the assembled ranks. Julius Caesar's weathered face bears the marks of 10 years, campaigning in the savage lands of Gaul. His scarred hands grip the reins of his stallion, and you can see the steam rising from the horse's breath in the frigid air. The animal stamps impatiently, its hooves squelching in the muddy riverbank. You remember how this all began, decades ago, when you were just a young recruit, watching the Senate tear itself apart. The populares and optimates had been at each other's throats for generations, brothers choosing different sides, families splitting like wood under an axe. You had seen Tiberius Gracchus rise and fall, watched Marius inspire the common soldiers with promises of land and glory, felt the ground tremble when Sulla's armies marched on Rome itself. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of pine from the distant mountains. You pull your woolen cloak tighter around your shoulders, feeling the rough fabric against your neck. Your fellow soldiers stand in perfect formation, their breath creating small clouds in the cold air. The jangle of mail and the creak of leather create a familiar symphony that has accompanied you through countless campaigns. Caesar's voice cuts through the morning silence like a blade through silk. He speaks of the Senate's betrayal, of Pompey's demands that he return to Rome defenseless. You know what awaits him there: imprisonment, exile, or worse. The promises he made to you and your brothers in arms would die with his political career. Your discharge bonus, your plot of land, your comfortable retirement, all of it hangs in the balance. The river before you marks more than just a boundary between territories. It represents the edge of legality, the point beyond which there is no return. South of these waters, Caesar has no right to command an army. To cross would be treason, an act of war against the very republic you have sworn to defend. Yet as you look into your commander's eyes, you see the same determination that carried you through the forests of Gaul, across the Rhine, even to the mysterious shores of Britannia. You feel the weight of your gladius at your side, its familiar grip worn smooth by your calloused palm. The bronze fittings of your belt dig into your waist as you straighten your posture. Around you, your tent mates, men who have shared bread and wine with you for years, murmur their agreement. These are not strangers or conscripts, but veteran legionaries who have bled together, celebrated together, survived together. The decision, when it comes, feels as inevitable as the changing of seasons. Caesar raises his arm, and you hear his famous words carried on the wind. The die is cast. Your centurion barks the order to advance, and you feel your hobnailed sandals dig into the muddy bank as you step forward into the shallow waters. The river is shockingly cold, even through your leather boots. You feel the current tugging at your legs as you wade across, your equipment jangling with each step. The water reaches your knees, then your thighs, soaking through the wool of your tunic. Behind you, the supply wagons creak and groan as they follow, their wheels splashing through the ford. As you reach the southern bank, you realize you are no longer a defender of the Republic. You are its enemy. The irony is not lost on you. For years, you have fought barbarians and rebels in the name of Rome's glory. Now you march against Rome itself, following the same eagles that once led you to victory against the Helvetii and the Germanic tribes. The countryside of northern Italy spreads before you like a painted map. Olive groves line the roads, their silver-green leaves rustling in the breeze. The smell of wild herbs, thyme and rosemary, drifts from the hillsides. In the distance, You can see columns of smoke rising from farmsteads, where families go about their daily lives, unaware that civil war has just begun. Your legion moves with practiced efficiency along the Roman roads. Your feet know the rhythm of the march, 20 miles a day, the steady tramp of iron-shod sandals on stone. The sound echoes off the hills like distant thunder. At night, you help construct the marching camp, driving wooden stakes into the ground, your hands bleeding from splinters as you work by torchlight. The news reaches you in fragments, carried by scouts and messengers who ride hard from the south. Pompey is fleeing. The great general who once brought the East to its knees, who paraded exotic kings through Rome's streets, is running from your advance. The Optimate senators scatter like leaves before a storm, abandoning their city rather than face Caesar's veterans. You reach the coastal town of Brundisium, just as the last of Pompey's ships disappear over the horizon. The salt air stings your nostrils as you stand on the harbor walls, watching the white sails grow smaller against the blue expanse of the Adriatic. The waves lap against the stone quays, and seagulls cry overhead, diving for scraps left by the fleeing army. Italy has fallen in just 66 days. You can hardly believe it. The peninsula that took your ancestors centuries to conquer has surrendered without a single major battle. In the taverns of Rome, you hear the citizens speak of Caesar with a mixture of fear and admiration. Some call him liberator, others tyrant. You care little for such words. You follow your eagle, as you always have. But the war is far from over. Word comes that Pompeian forces in Spain are preparing to march. You feel a familiar knot in your stomach, the anticipation before battle that never fully goes away, no matter how many times you've faced it. Your century is ordered to prepare for another campaign, and you begin the familiar ritual of checking your equipment, sharpening your blade, making peace with the gods. The march to Spain takes you through landscapes that shift like dreams. Alpine passes where the air grows thin and cold, your breath coming in short gasps as you climb narrow mountain paths. The clatter of armor echoes off rocky walls, and loose stones skitter down the mountainsides at your passage. At night, you huddle around campfires that seem pitifully small against the vast darkness, the flames casting dancing shadows on your weathered faces. When you finally descend into the Iberian plains, the heat hits you like a physical blow. The sun beats down mercilessly on your bronze helmet, and sweat soaks through your woolen tunic. The landscape is harsh and brown, dotted with scrubby vegetation that offers little shade. Your water runs low, and you learn to march in the pre-dawn darkness, resting during the blazing noon hours. The Pompeian forces you face here are different from the raw recruits who fled Italy. These are hardened veterans who know the terrain, who fight with the desperation of men defending their homeland. The first skirmishes are brutal affairs, short, savage encounters that leave both sides bloodied and exhausted. You taste dust and copper in your mouth as you clash with enemy shields, feeling the impact jar through your arm to your shoulder. The Spanish sun glares off polished bronze, momentarily blinding you as you duck under a swinging gladius. The smell of sweat and blood mingles with the dry scent of the dusty earth, kicked up by hundreds of trampling feet. Victory, when it comes, is swift and decisive. A night attack that Caesar turns into a counter-ambush, catching the enemy off guard in the pre-dawn darkness. You advance through olive groves, your sandals silent on the soft earth, guided only by the whispered commands of your centurion and the barely visible plume of the man ahead of you. The trapped Pompeians surrender on a hilltop, surrounded and without water. You watch them lay down their arms, these men who might have been your brothers in arms in different circumstances. Their faces are gaunt with thirst and defeat, their eyes hollow in the morning light. Some weep openly. Others stare into the distance with the blank expression of men who have lost everything. Spain secured, you march back across the mountains toward Italy. The return journey feels different, triumphant, but also ominous. You know Pompey still lives, still commands armies in the east. The great reckoning is yet to come, and it will likely take place across the wine-dark waters of the Mediterranean, in lands where Alexander once walked and Achilles fought. Back in Italy, you discover the consequences of blockade. The ports are sealed, grain ships turned away, and the people grow hungry. In the streets of Rome, you see hollow cheeks and desperate eyes. Children beg for bread, while their parents queue at distribution points that often have nothing to give. The smell of unwashed bodies and desperation hangs heavy in the narrow streets. Winter approaches like a stalking wolf, and Caesar makes a decision that seems like madness. You will cross to Greece in the depths of winter, when the Adriatic is at its most treacherous. Standing on the dock at Brundisium, you watch the gray waves crash against the harbor walls, sending spray high into the air. The wind howls through the rigging of the transport ships, and you feel salt on your lips, taste the brine in the back of your throat. The crossing is a nightmare of heaving decks and green faces. You grip the ship's rail with white knuckles, feeling your stomach lurch with each rise and fall of the vessel. Around you, your tent mates vomit over the side, their faces pale as marble in the wan winter light. The smell of sickness mingles with the salt spray and the tar used to seal the ship's hull. But you make it across, landing on the beaches of Epirus as dawn breaks over the mountains. The sand crunches under your feet as you wade ashore, grateful to feel solid ground beneath you once more. The Greek landscape stretches inland, rolling hills covered with olive trees and vineyards dormant in the winter cold. The air smells of pine and wild herbs, different from the familiar sense of Italy, but somehow welcoming. The siege at Dyrrachium becomes a test of endurance that stretches through the hot summer months. You dig trenches in the rocky soil, your hands bleeding from the sharp stones, sweat stinging your eyes as you work under the merciless sun. The wooden palisades you construct stretch for miles, creating a maze of fortifications that trap both armies in a deadly embrace. Water becomes more precious than wine. You ration each sip, feeling the liquid slide down your parched throat like liquid gold. At night, you lie on your bedroll, listening to the sounds of the enemy camp. Distant voices, the whinny of horses, the clatter of armor as sentries change guard. Sometimes you hear music, a flute or lyre, and remember that those men across the lines have the same dreams and fears as you. The breakthrough, when it comes, catches you off guard. Pompey's assault shatters your wooden barricades like kindling, and you find yourself retreating across broken ground, stumbling over fallen timber and scattered equipment. The taste of defeat is bitter in your mouth, mixed with dust and the metallic tongue of fear sweat. But Caesar does not despair, and neither do you. The retreat becomes a regrouping, the temporary setback transformed into an opportunity. You march inland toward the plains near Pharsalus, where the rolling grassland will give both armies room to maneuver. The summer heat shimmers off the distant mountains, and cicadas buzz in the olive trees that dot the landscape. The night before the great battle, you sit by your campfire, running a whetstone along your gladius blade. The rhythmic scraping sound is almost meditative, a familiar ritual that calms your nerves. Around you, your comrades perform their own pre-battle preparations, checking armor straps, sharpening pilum points, making quiet prayers to Mars and fortune. The morning of the battle dawns clear and hot. You stand in formation on the left wing of Caesar's army, feeling the weight of your armor, the familiar grip of your scutum in your left hand. Across the plain, Pompey's larger army glitters in the sunlight like a bronze sea. Their cavalry masses on your right, a forest of spear points and colorful plumes that seems to stretch to the horizon. The battle cry, when it comes, emerges from thousands of throats as one voice. You charge across the stubbled field, your feet pounding the dry earth, feeling the line surge forward like a living thing. The distance closes with terrifying speed, and then you slam into the enemy, ranks with a crash that echoes across the plain. The fighting is fierce, but brief. You watch Pompey's cavalry, his pride and hope, break and flee before Caesar's veteran horsemen. Without their protection, the enemy infantry finds itself outflanked, surrounded, cut off from retreat. The slaughter that follows haunts your dreams for years to come, the cries of dying men mixing with the clash of bronze on bronze. Victory tastes of dust and blood and bitter wine. As you stand among the wreckage of Pompey's army, you realize you have just witnessed the end of an era. The great general who once dominated the eastern Mediterranean has fled the field, his dreams of glory shattered like pottery on stone. Yet you feel no joy, only a bone-deep weariness that comes from killing men who might have been your brothers. Pompey's flight to Egypt ends in betrayal and blood. When news reaches you of his assassination on the beaches of Alexandria, you see Caesar weep for his fallen rival. The man who once stood as his ally in the first triumvirate deserved a better death than butchery at the hands of scheming courtiers. Even in war, there should be honor. Egypt becomes another battlefield, another campaign. You march through streets that have stood since the time of the pharaohs, past monuments that dwarf even Rome's greatest buildings. The air shimmers with heat and the exotic scents of incense and spices. You help Caesar place Cleopatra on her throne, watching this fallen queen who will one day bear your commander's son. The wars that follow seem almost anticlimactic after Pharsalus. You march to Asia Minor, where King Pharnakes learns the folly of challenging Rome's eagles. The battle at Zela is over almost before it begins, a brief, decisive action that adds another victory to Caesar's growing legend. You return to the familiar rhythms of campaign life, the long marches, the nightly camps, the brotherhood of shared hardship. Africa provides the next challenge, a return to the sun-baked landscapes where Hannibal once threatened Rome's existence. The city of Thapsus falls after a siege that leaves you covered in dust and glory, another pin in the map of Caesar's conquests. Yet with each victory, you sense that something essential is being lost. The old certainties, the ancient traditions that once bound the Republic together. Spain calls you back for one final campaign, a return to the harsh landscape where the civil war truly began. Here you face the last sons of Pompey, young men seeking to avenge their father's death and restore their family's honor. The fighting is savage, personal, in a way that previous battles were not. These are not foreign enemies, but Romans fighting Romans, citizens destroying the very state they claim to serve. When the last Pompeian resistance finally crumbles, you find yourself standing once again on Spanish soil, breathing air thick with dust and the smoke of burning camps. The civil war is over, but you wonder what victory really means. Caesar is supreme, the most powerful man in the Roman world, but the republic that bred you lies in ruins. You march back to Rome through countryside that bears the scars of years of conflict. Abandoned farms dot the landscape, their fields returning to wilderness. In the towns, you see too many widows, too many orphans, too many empty spaces where young men should be standing. The price of victory has been paid in Roman blood, and the debt will echo through generations yet unborn. Rome welcomes Caesar with triumph and terror in equal measure. You march through streets lined with cheering crowds, but you can see the fear in their eyes, the uncertainty about what comes next. The old system is broken beyond repair, the balance between populares and optimates finally shattered by the weight of individual ambition and institutional failure. As you stand in formation before the Temple of Jupiter, listening to Caesar's victory speech echo off the marble columns, you understand that you have been witness to something unprecedented. Not just a civil war, but the death of the Roman Republic itself. The problems that began with the Gracchi brothers, that festered through generations of political deadlock and military intervention, have finally reached their inevitable conclusion. The future stretches ahead, uncertain and full of shadows. You know that Caesar's triumph cannot last forever, that other ambitious men will rise to challenge his supremacy. the fundamental conflicts that drove this war, between rich and poor, between tradition and innovation, between the demands of empire and the limitations of republican government, remain unresolved. Yet you have survived, and that is something. Your weathered hands bear the scars of a dozen campaigns. Your eyes have seen the rise and fall of the greatest men of your age. You have crossed the Rubicon and lived to tell the tale. In the years to come, when young men ask about the Civil War that destroyed the Republic, you will have stories to tell of courage and cowardice, of loyalty and betrayal, of the price that nations pay when they turn their swords upon themselves. The setting sun casts long shadows across the forum, and you can smell wood smoke from the cooking fires of your camp outside the city walls. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new uncertainties, but tonight you are content to be alive, to feel the solid ground beneath your feet and taste wine on your tongue. You have witnessed history, participated in the transformation of the known world, and somehow emerged with your honor intact.